My name is Daniel. I'm Owen Swords. Welcome to Daniel's Sports Swords.
The first signing I want to talk about is the Jimmy Garoppolo signing.
Okay. Yeah, definitely of interest for me. I'll preface, being a Chiefs fan. So, Jimmy Garoppolo, to the Raiders is definitely an interesting move. I'd say his contract's a little bit kind of under, the traditional quarterback market. I think it was about 3 years and 67 million, I think was his contract. So pretty interesting move, I think, for the Raiders. Gets them a competitive quarterback without really having to go all in on a expensive quarterback in that 30 to 40 million, the kind of the Daniel Jones range of quarterback salary. So I think it'll be an interesting move. I mean, I still don't think the Raiders will be incredibly competitive, with Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think it is an interesting move and maybe kind of a bridge from Derek Carr to maybe another quarterback. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I said Garoppolo to Las Vegas. Well, he gets to throw the ball to Devontae Adams.
Hmm.
And having the Garoppolo Adams connection there in Las Vegas, that's going to be just really, really cool to have to not just that connection. Well, Devontae Adams is one of the top receivers in the NFL
For
today,
sure.
in this era of football.
I
Period.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I'd say, someone had a down year this past year, but that was probably more just due to, kind of the team's lack of success, than necessarily his individual performance. But
Yeah, like if now we're gonna head to a different player,
okay.
but at the wide receiver position, Adam Thielen.
Okay, yeah. It's the Panthers. Yeah, that was an interesting move, because I know kind of early on in free agency, the rumor was, maybe he'd, be looking for more of a contender, kind of a team that would be a Super Bowl contender, maybe even with, either a veteran or a star quarterback. I know it was kind of the rumors early on. So, people were mentioning teams such as like the Chiefs or maybe slightly, I'd heard a couple people mention the Bills, or like the Ravens. I know were another heavily rumored spot for him. So I think an interesting landing spot for him at the Panthers. Definitely in a rebuilding mode. That team, now, with the first overall pick. So we'll see how they go with that pick. But I think an interesting spot for him. He's definitely, losing DJ Moore. He'll probably be, their lead receiver, if not, at least they're a top two receiver for them. So he'll definitely get a lot of touches, and still have a lot of the spotlight. So I think an interesting move by the Panthers. To be honest, I'll say one I didn't really expect. I kind of thought the Panthers were in like a full rebuild mode, and maybe for them, they saw him as a good veteran that can kind of come in and mentor, some of those young guys that they're going to be bringing in, with some of those top draft picks. But yeah, I think and another kind of surprising signing for me.
For me, I am a big Panthers fan. I'm excited about the Thielen signing,
Yeah,
and we now have Carolina. I should say not to we, but Carolina. Don't just got Thielen.
hmm
They got a duo now. DJ Shark, the leading receiver this last season with the Lions, and pairing Shark and Thielen. Yes, you lost DJ Moore in the trade for the first overall selection,
hmm
but you still went out and signed DJ Chark and Adam Thielen. Great
Yeah, so
signings.
I know that Adam Thielen, I think, is final. I think the DJ Chark is still kind of in the works, but it does sound like there's a good chance that at least they're targeting both of those guys, which would be an interesting combination.
Yeah, and whoever that quarterback is, no one likes to hear whoever the quarterback is going to be. So stay tuned for my mock draft special for that. Speaking of the quarterback position,
Hmm.
let's move over to Derek Carr.
Okay, yeah. Derek Carr to the Saints. So again, I think I mean, it was definitely rumored, kind of from the start that the Saints were the favorites to land Derek Carr. So I guess not surprising from that standpoint that he ended up landing there. But again, I think a little bit surprising. I mean, obviously he wasn't a huge contract. I think it was about $35 million a year, was his contract. So not a substantial investment. But I'd say the Saints are, at least in my opinion, not really contenders. Or, they'll definitely have to have some breaks to become contenders. So was a little bit surprised with the signing. Just because I almost thought, similarly to some of the other teams that they may try and have a couple of years where they would just really rebuild and, kind of try and stock up their talent. Because I know they've been in a pretty bad cap position for the last couple of years. Just a lot of older players still on big contracts, and so I think I was a little surprised how much interest they showed kind of from the start, and ultimately got the contract done. So kind of a surprising but not surprising move, I would say. But I guess, yeah, what were your thoughts on him, leaving the Raiders, and obviously, like we mentioned, his replacement, Jimmy G?
Yes, for Derek Carr, I like that signing for New Orleans.
Hmm.
I am not going to say this, but I have a feeling it might happen. It may not, but almost every new starting quarterback. Well, when the Saints signed Drew Brees, Hurricane Katrina came.
Yeah.
Then when they signed, I believe it was like James Winston or
Yep.
someone,
Hmm.
that another hurricane came. Now I have
Yeah.
a feeling, man,
Definitely.
that might
Hope.
happen with a new quarterback and Derek Carr. I just have a feeling.
Well, I hope he can break the trend. So hopefully that won't come to pass. But yeah, I think he definitely brings some interest to the team, I would say. I guess in my opinion though, he's definitely, I'd say, a better quarterback probably than Jameis Winston, or at least a more consistent quarterback than Jameis Winston. But in my opinion, which again, not a huge contract for a quarterback, 35 million a year. But comparing that to, what they could have potentially got from Jameis Winston, or kind of another kind of middle of the road quarterback. I guess we'll see if it pays off for them. I'm a little bit doubtful. Again, also, being a Chiefs fan and watching the Raiders play a lot, I saw, some of the great throws and great plays that Derek Carr could make. But I also really saw the inconsistency. Kind of in the same way of Jameis Winston. Not as many of kind of the interceptions or turnovers, that type of inconsistency, but just a little bit of um, maybe not driving through on throws, and kind of missing some guys, or really kind of dropping some important games. So I'm a little bit doubtful on if that's gonna really help the Saints turn the corner. But I think it definitely is overall an improvement in their quarterback position.
And yeah, like he gets his really ball to Chris Olave. And
Hmm.
then the Saints also respected Michael Thomas.
Yep.
And having the now throw the ball to second-year wide receiver from Ohio State, Chris Olave, and then another Ohio State receiver by Michael Thomas, who's a
Yep.
veteran.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be a great duo for as a wide receiver, at the wide receiver position for Derek Carr to throw the ball to. Yes, now we move on. Why not we talk protection? So
Okay.
Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah. So another signing for an AFC West team, so going to the Broncos, and they definitely needed some more protection for Russell Wilson. I mean, I think early on in the season, some of the inconsistency of Russ definitely kind of fell on Russell Wilson himself, to be honest. Whether you can say it's ego or just some misses. I think the second half of the season, some of the struggles really came from poor offensive line play. And I can't remember the game it was, but we kind of saw some conflict on the offensive line of the Broncos in one of their games, and so hopefully he can kind of come in and bring some talent and maybe even kind of help that chemistry of the offensive line, because it seemed like, especially towards the end of the season, the offensive line for the Broncos kind of really struggled. And in the NFL, offensive and defensive line can, really determine games. I mean, we always think about the quarterback and the wide receivers and, some of the flashy players, but, we kind of forget that, the Chiefs and the Eagles had two of the best, offensive and defensive lines in the NFL. And obviously with Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, they had great quarterback play as well. But I think it really shows the importance of offensive line, and maybe that signing will show that the Broncos are kind of starting to realize that as well. Curious about your thoughts. What were your thoughts on his move from the 49ers over to the Broncos?
Yes, so I'm gonna start us off with what really went down with the Broncos. They
Mm-hmm.
fired their head coach Nathaniel Hackett. They well, they got defensive coordinator Ezero Evero.
Yep.
Then they hired, they did not hire, but they traded for Sean Payton, and the way he worked his Saints was the line
Mm-hmm.
first, and the, and the Mike McGlinchey fits his scheme,
Mm-hmm.
and I like this signing of Mike McGlinchey because he can really protect Russell Wilson and not have him get him back into that superstar status that he was in Seattle. Yes, I feel like the signing of McGlinchey can really help out Denver in what they are trying to do there in Denver, Colorado. We can stay in the area of protection.
Mm-hmm.
Jawan Taylor.
Mm-hmm. So one that was very exciting for me as a Chiefs fan. I think the first thing we saw in all of it was the pretty large contract. I mean, I'll be the first to say it. 4 years and $80 million for, at the time, a right tackle, I think is a very large contract. But obviously, there's the talk of potentially shifting him to left tackle. And then also he kind of has the ability to play either tackle position, which is something that the Chiefs really like. The Chiefs, not that he necessarily would be a swing tackle or, a tackle that can kind of play both positions or even shift inside to guard. But I think the fact, that he can play left or right tackle is maybe one of the things that attracted the Chiefs to him. Also, he's pretty young, younger than some of the other offensive linemen or offensive tackles that were on the market. So I think the Chiefs were a little bit less worried about giving him, a 4-year deal because he is a younger offensive lineman.
The way I see it is a way to protect Mahomes.
For sure.
And also use in the past he has gotten hurt. He has suffered some major injuries. And let's talk, well, I'm going to mention that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
That offensive line was not good at all. We need something. But we had a better offensive line to win Super Bowl 57.
Yep. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the importance of offensive line, I think, is huge. And the Chiefs really realized that. And, we really hit home runs on Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. So to have those guys has been super invaluable, but also Joe Tooney and Orlando Brown Jr., I think ultimately was a success with the Chiefs. Even though we ultimately let him go in the past season, he maybe wasn't performing, in my opinion, to the Pro Bowl level. He was still a very solid offensive tackle. And like you mentioned with Mahomes being injured, obviously, was not Orlando Brown Jr.'s fault. But, the person who injured Mahomes, came around that left tackle and beat Orlando Brown Jr. around the edge, which is something he kind of struggled with, that, the speed pass rushers, which again is why some people have questioned him as a left tackle. He's not as fast as some of the other left tackles. He's kind of slower on his feet. And we'll see if Jamal can be an improvement at that position, and again, hopefully keep Mahomes healthy.
But why not the running backs? You probably don't know this signing yet. If you do, then why not do we talk about Devin Singletary to the Texans?
Okay. What were your initial thoughts?
Well, I see a 1-2 punch with Dameon Pierce and him, Devin Singletary.
Okay. Yeah, Dameon Pierce definitely had a very solid rookie year, I would say. And Devin Singletary is definitely a solid back. Not a star, but definitely a very solid back who, can hopefully provide some depth for them. So I would agree that, it's a decent move for them. I'll be honest in saying that I haven't seen the contract details on that. So it's, hard to comment on, his value in the market. But his past year, or at least part of the year, or the full year with the Bills, I was thinking of Nyheim Hines, the partial year. But his full year with the Bills, I think he was around 800 yards for the full season, which a decent season overall, I'd say, for him and for the Bills. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see him on the Texans with Dameon Pierce.
We're going to stay on the Texans.
Okay.
Because they did sign another tight end, which also is a protection position as well. Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, I think this will be a great move for them. I think he was kind of underrated on the Cowboys, and I think a lot of times the tight end position can be underrated across the league. We saw some of the top teams in the NFL that had great tight ends. The Chiefs, the 49ers, the Eagles,
Patriots.
yeah. But I guess I was talking kind of the top of the league really had great tight ends. And Dalton Schultz, I think, was kind of coming into his own and can be one of those great tight ends. And so I think it was just a 1-year deal that he signed. I think it was about 1 year, $9 million, I think, is what's been reported on that deal. But I think it's a great move for the Texans. The Texans are really, I'd say, trying to set up. It seems like, which you mentioned You'll be talking about this more in your mock draft, but the Texans seem like they're setting up to draft a quarterback, and a lot of their free agent moves seem to be trying to set up for that. So whether that's Dalton Schultz or re-signing Laramie Tunsil, I think Dalton Schultz will be a great move for them, and only being on a 1 year contract, it's kind of a almost a trial run they get to have with him, and in a kind of indefinitely a rebuilding year for the Texans. So I think it's a great signing for the Texans.
Let's move on from the Texans. Let's go to the Motor City. If I'd be you, start the reasons. So that's my engine starting for you, because we're heading to Motor City, where the Lions love their head coach Dan Campbell, and they decided to sign from the ball hawking, stealing corners, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, so I really like this move. I mean, the Lions have kind of been lacking at cornerback. They've tried to draft for cornerbacks, and I think they've got some talented cornerbacks, but who have kind of underperformed. But I really like this move, and I'll be honest that I think the Lions are really set up well for success. We'll probably talk about it more in your mock draft, but they have 4 picks in the top 50. They have I think it's the sixth and maybe the 15th or 16th pick. So 2 kind of top 15, top 16 draft picks to go along with some I think really solid signings. So I think it's a great move, and I'm really bullish on the Detroit Lions' future. I think they can be a really solid team even next year. I mean, I think they're set up well to be really good in 2 or 3 years with some of their young talent, but I think they'll be a very competitive team. I mean, I think they'll be competing with the Vikings, but in my opinion, I think they're if not the favorite, definitely one of the strongest contenders in their division. With the Packers, potential a little bit more of a rebuilding year, with possibly losing Aaron Rodgers. They're probably guaranteed to lose Aaron Rodgers. The Bears still slightly rebuilding, I'd say, and the Vikings still being solid. But I think the Lions are really going to take a step forward and be one of the favorites in the division.
I really like this signing for Detroit because, like I said, he's a ball hawking, stealing corner. He's like a motor in that secondary, for sure.
Agree.
And you have Kirby Joseph at safety. Then draft a cornerback or sign a cornerback to pair with Gardner Johnson.
Yeah, I know that's been the rumor. Is depending on how the draft board falls, they might end up going with the cornerback with their number 6 pick, or even potentially with that, I can't remember, it's 15th or 16th pick that they hold. So I think there is a chance, like you said, for them to keep adding to that cornerback room. That's only getting better.
We're going to move on from the Motor City. So yeah, we will now. I really like this signing. Why not Dalton Minahill?
Yeah, so another Chiefs signing, which again I think slightly a gamble. I mean, I think the 2 biggest moves for the Chiefs have been a little bit of gambles. With the offensive tackle, and then Charles Omenihu. I think obviously, and everybody sees this, incredibly talented. defensive end, and sometimes even would play kind of that hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end position, which I think will be very valuable for the Chiefs. Maybe his contract was a little bit lower than expected, just partly due to some legal issues that he's still dealing with, which I think was an advantage for the Chiefs. To be able to get him at that price. But I think it'll be a great signing for the Chiefs, is my hope. I think he really brings some versatility to the defensive line with, the Chiefs losing Frank Clark. I think he really, fills in for that hopefully that Frank Clark role. Frank Clark, he really showed up, the strongest in the playoffs. Maybe wasn't, seemingly as productive in the regular season. But I think the hope is that Omenihu can, really fill that Frank Clark role and, bring some great pass rush to the Chiefs. So I think it's definitely an exciting move. It's, kind of a gamble. I'll say in my opinion, still just a 2-year deal. So, there's not a lot locked in, long term. But I think it's exciting, definitely an exciting talent and player. Curious, what's your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm gonna go over what Luke was saying about filling in that Frank Clark role.
Mm-hmm.
We need an edge rush, period.
Yep.
Losing Frank Clark, then we add in Omenihu to Paris. Well, one of our stud young edge rushers in George Karlaftis. And also we can't forget about this, one of the greatest DTs in football today, Chris Jones.
I'll say it. I think the best defensive tackle in the NFL, and Chris Jones, possibly the best defensive. You get, probably some of the edge rushers can make the argument, but I think possibly the best defensive lineman in the NFL, and Chris Jones. I think he's been incredible, especially the past year, but really, over the past 3 to 5 years, he's been one of the most consistently best defensive linemen in the NFL.
Well, speaking of the Chiefs, we don't have Juju or Ron Darnell anymore, because I'm going to talk about Juju first.
Sure.
To the Patriots.
Yeah, so a 3-year, $33 million deal, which, I think some people were kind of surprised, just, from Juju's personality. He doesn't really seem like a Patriot. I saw Juju as kind of the, fun-loving kind of, he's backed away a little bit from it, but, kind of the fun-loving TikToker. He loves social media and kind of was a little bit braggadocious, on social media, which, is definitely not, what we think of when we think of the New England Patriots. So I'll be honest that I was, pretty shocked, just based on the personality, when I first saw that. But, from a purely football standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for the Patriots. Obviously, along with that, they moved on from Jakobi Meyers, who signed basically the exact same contract in free agency. So I think from a football standpoint, it definitely makes sense for them, trying to get some weapons for Mac Jones, which he's, I would say been missing the past few years. And I think he had maybe not a fantastic year for the Chiefs, but I think he had a very good year. Kind of flew under the radar a little bit. And also, I think one thing that people miss on Juju is that he's a great blocker. If you watch the Chiefs in the playoffs, some of the biggest runs or deep passes the Chiefs had, you'll see Juju throwing great blocks. And, I think that's something that, maybe gets overlooked in NFL wide receivers, but I think he's a fantastic blocker for a wide receiver. So I think from a football standpoint, it makes sense for the Patriots. You can maybe question the contract. Some people question the contract, thinking it's a little bit heavy given his level of production. But again, kind of a intriguing move.
Yeah, I think this Juju signing for the Patriots is a good sign for them because they needed a wide receiver badly.
Hmm.
They lost Devontae. No, they lost Jacoby Myers.
Yep.
They got Devontae Parker, and they. I was hoping the Chiefs would resign Juju, but free agency can get wild. He went to the Patriots, and great time for New England. He's a great. Yes, he is not. His personality is not Patriots like, but like Luke mentioned, they no longer have Jacoby Myers,
Hmm.
who signed with the Raiders.
Yep.
But there were so many receivers out there still.
Yeah, that's what's kind of surprising to me, and I think that's why maybe some people were surprised by the contract number of Juju. Has been that a lot of the wide receivers on the market have, either had a pretty slow market or maybe haven't got the numbers exactly that they're looking for. And so I'll say when I first saw the news of Juju's contract and him going to the Patriots, I was very surprised. I thought, and from all the reports I'd seen, that the Chiefs were really, trying to re-sign him. And so I think I was pretty surprised.
We're gonna stay with former Chiefs, but we go to the secondary. Chiefs fans, you're gonna hate this because another because of the Browns. The Browns are part of the city that also hosts the Bengals. You're gonna
Close.
hate that because the Browns, they have, well, they don't have that superstar quarterback anymore that they used to have in Baker Mayfield. He has taken a toll, but hopefully he bounced back this next year in Tampa. But back to the Browns. They lost Greedy Williams. And they also add, but in the safety position, Ron Thornhill. What do you think
Yeah.
about that signing, Luke?
Yeah, so I'll say as a Chiefs fan, I saw both sides of Juan Thornhill. I saw early on, his first two seasons. I mean, I'll be honest, but I thought he had potential to be a Pro Bowl safety. He really showed, flashes of great talent. I'll say in the last two seasons, he definitely was still a solid player. But there definitely were times where he really got burned in coverage. To be unfortunately to say, I still think he's a good safety, but I think it's part of the reason why the Chiefs, had drafted Cook, and why they were kind of setting up for Juan Thornhill leaving is because they were willing to let him walk. Um, and so I think he definitely, maybe on a new team, in a different scheme, maybe it'll be better suited for him and he can really kind of return to, some of that potential that we saw early on for him. Um, but I'll say, I mean, I was fine with, letting him leave the Chiefs. I mean, if, we could have got him on, maybe a cheaper contract, that would have been fine, to re-sign him. But I'll say I was fine to see him go, partly because I saw how much success the Chiefs had, and drafting a young secondary in the past couple of years. So I think maybe my hope is that um, it won't be a huge loss, or at least we can maybe minimize the impact of the loss.
Yeah, time when I mean time, because it's time to head to the last signing for this week recap. And that we have to. I'm gonna do this. Motor City again. With David Montgomery going to the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you before? I'm gonna let Luke do his analysis before it heads to me.
Yeah. So, kind of their Jamal Williams replacement, David Montgomery, who's a very solid back, has been very solid for the Bears in the past few seasons. I think a 3-year deal he signed with the Lions. I think 3-year, 18 million or around there. So not a small contract for a running back, not a huge contract in the grand scheme of things, but running backs tend not to get super large contracts anymore. So kind of surprising. I mean, not surprising that they, signed a running back, just because, it's definitely a position of need for them. But, in today's NFL, the trend has definitely been, drafting running backs, and, really only having running backs on rookie contracts. And then, really the only running backs who get second contracts are, kind of the superstars, or, the very solid players, which, I think David Montgomery's can, make a case for being close to that level. He's been a very solid running back, for the Bears, and, I think he'll continue to get better at the Lions. And, the Lions are, building a great offensive line. And, I think the Lions are a really up and coming team. So I'll say I was kind of neutral on the signing. I think he's a good running back. But again, I think, we have to also consider it, in the value perspective, and that, running backs, tend now not to, add a lot of wins to teams. Kind of we saw, Miles Sanders for the Eagles, they let him walk, even after his great performance in the last year. And then, the Chiefs with a, rookie and Isaiah Pacheco. And, a lot of the, teams with, not necessarily rookie, running backs, but at least running backs on rookie contracts has, like I mentioned, definitely become the trend. So definitely an interesting signing to see how it'll work out for the Lions.
I really like the signing of David Montgomery for Detroit. They lost Jamal Williams, but they get back. But they don't. Well, but they get Montgomery from Chicago to Windy City. They were known for the double dunk. Because dunk, hey, just gotta make a joke out of it, so. But even though they were known for that, I know you're trying to move on from that. But we have to bring that up when we talk about David Montgomery. Because Montgomery is a back that I think the Bears are going to. The reason why I brought up the double dunk is because this is a double dunk loss that the Bears have suffered by losing David Montgomery.
Really good. Okay.
I think he's gonna flourish under Dan Campbell's scheme and just have a big season. And also DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, and there's one to punch I'm excited about to watch this upcoming season.
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting one. Again, kind of very, DeAndre Swift being a very versatile back, still a very good runner, but also his ability to come out of the backfield, and, combining that with David Montgomery's great running ability. like you mentioned, I think it really sets them up for a great 1-2 punch. And, like I mentioned, and I'm not alone in saying that I think the Lions are going to be a pretty solid team. And I think they're really setting themselves up well.
And that is it for this week's recap. So I'm gonna. It's me, Daniel, from Dale's Barzots. What do you have to say to Barzots fans, Luke?
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Had a great time, talking a little free agency with Daniel, and make sure to stay tuned to his channel for more free agency news, as well as upcoming mock draft, some more kind of draft news, and then also some coverage throughout the season. So thanks for having me, Daniel. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you too, Luke. It's been an honor to finally share my family with this Barzot family. So, this Barz family anyway. So, this is Daniel, that's Luke, and we're gonna peace out for this week. We will see you in next week's recap.